I have done so many videos in the past few months discussing my disdain, disgust, and outright abhorrence for this new wave of feminism that we have all been subjected to in the last few years. This is the sort of feminism that is body positive no matter what shape or health tier you fall under, sex positive no matter how many STDs you contract, and ignorance positive because it simply makes no sense. It is narcissistic, jaded, cynical, and above all else, soulless. I've talked about it in Hollywood actresses, I've talked about it in Hollywood ideology, and I've talked about it in broad spectrum Hollywood stories. But now I want to address it in Star Wars and make what some might say is a bold claim. Feminism is the reason that Star Wars is in its death throes. It's not the hiring of bad directors, although they certainly play their part. It's not the bad writing, although that certainly exists too. It is the ideology and the actresses and directors who come to the medium already with a chip on their shoulders and an axe to grind with an established IP that has never wronged them and yet somehow is put on trial for the crime of fake misogyny. It's been happening since 2015, albeit in more subtle ways, but it has been escalating in the last few years with characters that are the brainchildren of producers and directors who have no business being on the big screen. It has happened with actresses like Amandla Stenberg and Moses Ingram, who are entitled and feel that Hollywood owes them something for the challenge they face in simply existing. It's been happening with already established characters taking on greater roles than they were ever meant to have and being obnoxious in them. And of course, it's happening with directors who are reaching way beyond their means and talent levels. I will just come right out and say it. Feminism in Star Wars has led to the death of creativity across the medium. There, I said it, and I will stand by it. Starting as early as The Force Awakens, where Daisy Ridley magically manages to fix the Millennium Falcon by removing a piece of machinery from the ship, up until she is able to keep Kylo Ren, a trained by Luke Skywalker Force user, out of her head, finishing with her being able to keep up with that same Kylo Ren in a lightsaber fight, also with no training. It's easy to see that nothing here was really well thought out. The writers, producers, directors, etc. went into the sequel trilogy with the mindset that Rey would never struggle physically. She would never be at a physical disadvantage for long, particularly against any man. The only doubts that she has will not come from her lack of training or skill. They won't come from her size or her lack of knowledge. They will almost entirely stem from the fact that she doesn't believe in herself. Once she does, however, well then, hope is restored. And the fact that she is a clone of Palpatine is perhaps the laziest way to explain this ever. It practically screams laziness and a lack of interest in their own character. Feminist power fantasies essentially make up the whole of Rey's character. Her one redeeming quality is that she doesn't have the personality that some of these other Force girl bosses do, and her actress seems to be nothing but lovely. Unfortunately, the congeniality of Daisy Ridley does not do nearly enough to save Rey from being a victim of shallow writing. There is nothing creative about the character of Rey. She is a shallow carbon copy of Luke in every way, from the solitary life on a desert planet to the great power that is in her blood to the mentor that she loses. And yet, unlike Luke, her character does not grow in the end. She is the same person she was at the beginning of the sequel trilogy. The knowledge, the power, the wisdom was inside of her all along, and the only obstacle that Rey has to overcome was her own lack of belief. We've seen that with characters in other mediums before, where the only thing holding them back is self-doubt rather than anything of true substance, and it is as shallow of a storyline now as it was then. When someone does not have to work for what they are given, when success is based upon gender or ideology rather than a system of meritocracy, well, that's when storytelling begins to die, and any buzzwords that are used to try and deflect from this obvious truth are only a smokescreen. Additionally, we have small Princess Leia in the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, a character that is similar to Rey in that the power was inside of her all along. How else would she be able to have plans that no sane adult should pay attention to, or hold off a fully trained Force user from getting inside her mind? It was the same sort of technique that Rey used for repelling Kylo Ren, the same sort of constipated, endless stare that somehow manages to save them even though they have no training and little to no context for what is going on. Leia spends most of the series leading Obi-Wan around, even though she's quite literally 10 years old. She always knows what to do, so the writers have no reason to think outside the box for her, They have no reason to alter her personality and change her thought processes as she goes through the series, which, is just a part of average life. Instead, she is quite literally perfect. Aside from the fact that she is a sociopath, apparently, who doesn't react to Obi-Wan's death at all in A New Hope after she knew him personally when she was 10 years old. But whatever, relationships really don't matter much anymore these days, it seems. Star Wars, in constructing their female characters, has started a story with their characters already at the very end, which renders everything they put out pretty much unusable as far as story is concerned, and forgettable within 5 minutes. As much as I like stories like The Mandalorian, it too has fallen victim to the feminism trap in making Bo-Katan an exception to every Mandalorian rule and bylaw. She's exempt from their creeds and ways, but still accepted by the wider community with little to no protest. And while as much as I think she could have been a cool character, this break from the norms really causes me to dislike her. Because Rey and Leia and Bo-Katan aren't really characters anymore. They are symbols of an ideology that is poisoning storytelling and will continue to poison storytelling. Feminism in Star Wars also represents a death of heroism. There is an obsession with equality and status to the point where most stories these days are not interested in talking about the hero's journey. When the Kenobi show released a few years ago, I was initially excited. I adored Ewan McGregor's character in these prequels and was eager to see more of him in a story that occurred between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope. He had always been a character that inspired hope to me, no matter how dark times became or how brutal life was. He would always answer it with charm and wit and a sparkle in his eye. He seemed to be one of those characters that believed deeply in people, a man who remained steadfast in his objectives to help others to the very end. And in the show, he's vastly different. It is one thing to have moments of doubt as a character because that is a very human thing. It is something completely different to abandon every ideal you have ever held and display cowardice to the audience in spite of the hero that a character once was. Obi-Wan displays all of this in a single scene in the show's first episode. He turns his back on a Jedi in need of help, offers him no comfort in the face of his need, and has no rebuttal when the same Jedi asks, "What happened to you?" And this is, of course, only the beginning. In order to compensate for the added characters of Reva and Leia, people we don't care about nearly as much, Obi-Wan is turned into a scared man for the majority of the show, running from Vader, running from stormtroopers, running from responsibility, running from pretty much everything. And in doing so, Obi-Wan is made to look like a fool in letting Reva go, in refusing to contain the threat to Luke because he has no reason to let her go alive, someone who has fallen, who has killed scores of Jedi due to anger at someone who she should have gone after a long time ago. In order to tell the stories of these women, in order to prop them up, one of the principal heroes of Star Wars is torn down into a sad shell of what he once was. Obi-Wan was once a character that was all about hope, even at great personal cost. He is familiar with the values of sacrifice and placing the lives of others above his own. So this hopeless character, this man who has given up on life, I don't recognize him, and I don't want to know him. Likewise with Luke Skywalker, his heroism is denied in order to bring Rey to the forefront. In the same vein, he has denied everything that he once stood for, is made a failure by the writers, and is incapable of teaching anything to Rey. If you notice, he is barely involved in any of her lightsaber training and offers only rudimentary and ridiculous lessons on the usage of the Force. His lack of heroism does not shine through in her training, and Yoda even confirms this by telling Luke that Rey had everything that she needed already and had no need of tomes of ancient Jedi wisdom. Luke himself does not even show up to the final battle, only sending some sort of Force projection of himself and dying alone on a remote island far away from anyone that he ever loved or cared for. Does this scream heroism to you? Does this scream nobility? Does this scream courage or valor or bravery? No. All it does is confirm that the writers don't really believe in heroism anymore. Or if they do, it must come from a woman first, before a legacy character. And finally, feminism in Star Wars also represents the death of morality. Nowhere is this more apparent than with shows like The Acolyte, which, praise be to God, is almost finished. But even before this, morals have been questionable in Star Wars for the last few years. From everything to genocide, to forced suicides, to hurting things and people simply for the sake of curiosity or pain, we have been introduced to a lot of women who simply haven't cared about the consequences of their actions or who they hurt. And what's maybe the most egregious is the emphasis on power that each new Star Wars project gives us. Each new Star Wars girl is said to be powerful, or wants to be powerful, or is told to strive for power no matter the ends. We are not given characters anymore who complete actions or follow through on their promises simply because it is the right thing to do anymore. Instead, we have characters who value power above all else.
So my character, you know, she's a powerful leader. She's a powerful leader. Yes, yes. In a very woman-centered world, which I was very excited to kind of be in that, because I feel like Star Wars is very like patriarchal, so it was kind of cool to have like this sort of woman-centered figure.
There has been such an emphasis placed upon power in shows like this as some sort of MacGuffin that is just up for the taking, and the more a person has of it, the more virtuous or inspiring they are. Characters want to be leaders more than they want to be heroes, and being a leader is simply defined by how much power a person has. Nothing else matters. There used to be a time when having unlimited power was seen as a bad thing, when characters were seen as virtuous for turning away from power when it was offered to them, seeing it as a test that they had to pass in order to remain grounded and moral people. Nowadays, those who don't seize as much power as they can and aren't inherent sociopaths are seen as weak and easily dismissible. How exactly did we get here? How did we get to a period in storytelling where kindness, heroism, morality, and responsibility are no longer of any value? This is not what people want, but unfortunately, it's what we keep getting. And until the money runs out and garbage like this stops getting made, I would suggest that everyone buy as much physical media as possible of old movies and shows and strap in for a long while of waiting. We're going to need it. Thanks so much for watching this video, guys. What do you think of all the characters that Star Wars has bombarded us with? Be sure to leave your thoughts down in the comments section and let the conversations begin. Until next time, everyone.